President of this trade association called the Motor Transport Association of Connecticut, which is a statewide trade association of the trucking industry. So we have about 800 companies that provide trucking services, freight haulers that are the traditional truckers, but also construction companies and movers and distributors and companies that use trucks incidental to their regular business. One of the things that I do is that I lobby the Connecticut General Assembly, the legislature, and I've been in this job for 26 years. Before this, I worked for former U.S. Senator Chris Dodd for 2 years in the House and 6 years in the United States Senate, and then before that I was an aide at the state capitol. And what I really am is a meat cutter. My father had a grocery store in Enfield, and that's the only thing I can prove to you that I know how to do. The rest of it's just me talking. For 23 of the 28 years I've been doing this, certain legislators have put in bills to require trucks to remove snow and ice from the tops of the vehicles. And for most of those years, I've been able to argue successfully that it's not really an easy thing to do. We don't want to send a driver up onto the top of a 53-foot long tractor trailer that's 13 feet high with a shovel to clean off snow and ice when the roof is not designed to carry the weight of the driver, and it's thin and it's dangerous and it's in violation of OSHA, and where do you want us to put this snow anyway? Are you going to stop people at the highway, and how much is the fine going to be? So for 20 years I was able to kill this bill until something happened, and that was that the wife of the Republican leader of the House of Representatives was crossing the George Washington Bridge one day in the middle of the winter, and a large sheet of ice blew up off of a truck in front of her, flipped over, and smashed down upon her windshield and shattered that windshield, scared the living daylights out of her. And she went home and she said to her husband, Big Shot, if you're so powerful, why don't you do something about this? Why don't you make it illegal for trucks to have snow and ice on top of them, because it's dangerous. So he put in a bill 2 or 3 years in a row. I was still able to fend it off because there was no practical solution to the problem. We didn't have a way to get snow and ice off of it. And so finally he said to me, look, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to pass this bill, but I'll give you some time where your industry can figure out a way to solve the problem. But you're not going to get away with telling us there's no solution to this problem anymore. You got to fix it. So he put an effective date. The bill passed with an effective date of 4 years later. The 4 years ended in January of 2014. And from then on, it's illegal to operate a vehicle in Connecticut with any accumulated snow or ice on top of it. The fine is $75, and if there's damage that occurs because that snow or ice flies off, the fine is $2,500. So in the interim, I've been talking about this with various industry groups. Go to national conventions. I go to the trailer manufacturers saying, what are you doing about this? They say, well, you know, nobody's really asked us to do anything about it. So we respond to our customers, and our customers are not saying they want something to happen. My colleagues from Florida say, we don't want any federal standard. We don't have snow and ice on our trucks. We don't want a required mechanism on a truck or some kind of technology which is not going to be useful, helpful, or will be expensive for us. So different ideas have come up. There was a guy in the Naugatuck River Valley who invented this, I don't know, it's like a pusher. That it's a strong motor and scraper that mounts on the front of the truck, and it senses when there's snow and ice on it. It comes up and it pushes it to the back, and then it returns to the front. Kind of expensive, prototype, not really in production at this stage of the game, hasn't really taken off. Other companies have come up with things that you would drive through. You know, it's like a football goal post that has a raising and lowering bar on it, and they drive the truck under that, and that pushes the snow off the back. Some guys came down to my office from Massachusetts in January, and their idea was you put a plastic net over the top of the truck. And what that net does is that if the water, if snow or ice accumulates, it freezes into the net. And so the net holds the ice from flying off, and eventually it all melts out. When I was at the public hearing on this thing, every single member of the General Assembly that was listening to me argue about this bill had a different idea as to how to do it. So some guy said, well, why don't you just run those, you know, like those wires that we have in the windshield? Why don't you put those on the top of the trailers? So, you know, we have refrigerated trailers sometimes, and I'm not sure that we want to run heat on the top of a refrigerated trailer. Why don't you de-ice like we de-ice airplanes? Well, that's toxic stuff. You can't just spray that around anywhere, and you can't carry a can of it in your truck and spray it on top of it and eat it. Now, one of the problems with this stuff is that if it's a fixed facility, if the trucks all go out at one time in the morning and come back to the same facility, you can park them inside. You can have one of these, they have spinning brushes you drive under that blows it all off. So those trucks that come back to the same place have a solution that's different. And what we need to have is something for those guys that are out going cross country that actually live in their truck often. They sleep in their truck, and they may park on the side of the highway or a rest area or a truck stop someplace and spend the night, and when they wake up in the morning they got 4 or 5 inches of snow on top. So they don't have a brush that they can drive through or a truck wash that they can go to. And nobody really has come up with a solution for that thing. Now, the notion of solar, some kind of solar mechanism is intriguing, and maybe that's where this ultimately goes. So when I heard that you guys had some idea that involved solar technology, I thought, well, son of a gun, you some smart kids over there. I'm going to go over into the questions. So all I know is it's some kind of a solar solution to our problem of accumulated snow and ice in the motor vehicles.
Well, the group's idea is to have solar panels, charge some batteries, which will run an electric motor, which is still to be mounted because this is still in stages, going to be mounted here. And so the belt, when it snows, the truck is parked, it snows, and then I'll just bring it around. In the morning, the trucker would hit the button, which would turn the electric motor, and the snow on the top would go off the back of the truck. And then the arm design came from the dump trucks on the road, so it would go that back into the park position and drive away.
That's very clever.
And then to put the belt back, we have a hook in the front, and the hydraulic arm would then put the belt back on.
That's pretty smart.
Now, the gears is where we're at because it's a work in progress. So the group was working yesterday with gears upstairs. And of course, so what we have, we're playing with the speed of motors and gears. And what we want to do is mount the motor with the large gear. I guess it will go like this. So this will hold the gear pack like this. So we're going to push that. This has a gear reduction so that the belt doesn't just fly back. So hopefully we have the right speed for the
That's
belt.
gonna be on the inside.
This will be right here. I mean, in real life, you'd have a small motor could run this.
But on the inside of the vehicle, not on the outside.
Would that be an issue?
You can, yeah, because width issues are important.
Okay,
So you can only be 102 inches wide. And we talked about height in the other room.
That's an
You know,
important
we
issue
try to
too.
maximize the cargo carrying capacity of any vehicle. So you push the limits as much as you can in terms of the size of the vehicle. So anything you give up in the side, you lose
okay.
in capacity. So you have to mount that on the inside.
Which would be another challenge, to run a gear at the top of the roller.
Yeah. You know what I like about this is that that this doesn't mess with the height of the vehicle.
But one of the designs was to do like a conveyor belt that stayed on top, but then again, there was a clearance problem.
Yeah, yeah, and this gets you down below the top line of the vehicle. So that you're adding, what is this made of?
Well, this is just one piece of material. This is actually made from a bag from developing film.
But this is gonna heat? Is this gonna heat?
No, it should be
What's
just,
the electrical, what's the solar do? Run the
we'll
power
run
plant?
the electric motor, which normally could just run off the
Yeah,
truck like any
right,
other thing.
right.
But for the purpose of the expo, we wanted to use solar to run the motor.
So this is, the expo is to use an eco-friendly power source.
Exactly. And I know people will say, well, if it's snowing out, the solar won't work, but the answer to that would be, like any battery pack, the batteries are always charged, so they'll work whether it's snowing or not, and they charge up on a sunny day.
Is there a way to heat it?
So far, not yet. But if you
You said the wires, right? Were you the guy with the wires?
Oh yeah.
So how about we put some wires in now? What would happen then? If you threw a switch and then
Like how wires.
that would release in case it got frozen down, you know, or in case it was so heavy with ice that you couldn't move it.
Yeah.
Maybe that works, I don't know. You got a big,
We also
you
talked
got,
about putting cleats on it, like a conveyor that would,
Oh, yeah.
so that the snow would.
yeah. We have 53 feet here and 102 inches wide of solid ice. You gotta have one hell of a motor to pull that, right? And if it's pushing down here, I'm just thinking if it was heated, it would make it easier to move, but it's also much more complicated. The other thing I just thought of when you mentioned that is that a lot of these vehicles have reefer units out here.
Yeah.
So, you know, this thing has to accommodate this thing turning, right? It's got enough space between the cab and the trailer for the reefer unit, but when you start, and this somebody smarter than me could tell you how to do that. I don't know how to do that, but you gotta make sure that you're not gonna bang into itself there. I think it's very clever. I like it. I like it. You guys are pretty smart.
Well, I wouldn't go that